Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Puget Lobe Chapter Ice Age Floods Institute. This is our March meeting, and I am just thrilled to have Tim Connor present to us on Beautiful Wounds, which is a compilation of narratives of amazing photography. And gosh, Tim's love of the Channel Scablands and of the Ice Age flood story just kind of flows through this story. Tim, welcome.
Good to be here tonight, Dale. Thanks for inviting me. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So I guess I'll start with a bit of a story. So Beautiful Wounds came out 10 months ago. And I got some pre-press in Spokane. The local newspaper ran a story which emphasized the personal saga in the book, which followed on a divorce, a death of a friend by cancer, and other heartaches, but primarily a divorce. And I was sitting at the Hive, which is a wonderful new Spokane library facility where I hosted my first book event. Gosh, I think it was on Mount St. Helens Day, actually, May 18th of last year. And one of my friends came up to me, and her husband hadn't come with her, but she'd brought her mother. And her mother was not smiling, and my friend said, "Well, she saw the story in the paper, and she said, oh, that's all I need is an evening of depression and divorce." So anyway, I'm going to try to be light on the divorce and really heavy on the photography. And the whole purpose of the sojourn in the Scabland at that time of my life was to get my head together and experience the spiritual solace of a place which, since I was a young boy, has some special meaning to me, and that's covered in the book. So anyway, if you haven't seen Beautiful Wounds, it's at the Ice Age Flood Institute store. Here's what the cover looks like. This is one of it's got over 100 color photographs, including this spread. Both of these photos happen to be from the Drumheller channels, but the book covers I would say most of the Scabland venues, although I think, like a lot of other people, I would have liked to have had more time in Moses Coulee. I've been back there again since the book was published, but I think I've covered the other places fairly well. So what I'm going to do tonight is a couple things. I'm going to show you my slideshow called Scabland Sojourn, and then an 8-minute film that was put together from video clips that I took during many of my outings. I've mixed in a little bit of geology. Probably not much of that's going to be new to you, but I thought I would cover it as part of the whole package. So a little bit about myself. My awards have come from investigative reporting. I graduated from Washington State University in journalism in 1979, and quickly went to work as an investigative reporter and photographer. I was actually working as a photojournalist at Mount St. Helens Blue in Ellensburg, but in the years that followed that, I was largely letting other people do the photography, including when I would do like a package for the Portland Oregonian Sunday magazine. It was only really in recent years that I got heavily back into photography, and it was part of the incentive for me to take a camera into the Scablands is, as many of you know, and this is no swipe at all at the geologists and trail guiders, but a lot of the photography in the Scablands was unfortunately all in black and white, and looked to have been photographed in midsummer. And I just, while I appreciated the photos as reference, I was, I don't know, I guess chagrined that it didn't show more of what I get to see out there and what you get to see if we go out there in early spring. And there'll be some places, the Drumheller included, where it's very lush. So that's part of what I was hoping to capture. I'm also in the slideshow tonight going to show you things beyond the landscape, which are some of the birds and animals that we all get to meet out there that I photographed as well. So I'm going to turn on my screen share and go open up. Boy, I hope I didn't lose anybody. Let's see. Bear with me for a second and I will get the slideshow up and running. Any day now. Here we go. Oh, how's that looking on your end? Dale, how am I
Tim,
doing?
I don't
Tim-
see it yet.
Yeah, we can't see it yet, Tim.
Okay, then I must have messed up on the screen share function. Let me go back to Zoom here. Okay. Well, this is disappointing. So is all that you're seeing of me my face or?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I apologize for this. It was seemed to be working just fine when we checked it out. Let me go back into Zoom and see what I can get.
Yep, take your time.
There we go. Oh, okay. How's that?
Great.
Okay, sorry about that. I was just hitting the wrong button there. I need to practice more, I suppose. So I'm gonna, this is the cover. Obviously, I've got a coyote on the left, and I think that's a Cooper's hawk on the right. I can't quite see it. But I thought I would start with one of my friends. This is actually the signature fish of the Spokane River. This is a native red band trout. And this, it's not every trout that will let me swim with them, but this guy did several times last year. So I was able to get some good pictures of him, although it's not a bad picture of one of his friends back there in the background. The reason I wanted to start with this photo in the Spokane River is those rocks beneath that fish are glacial flood cobbles. These are cobbles that were brought into the Spokane Valley and dumped into the Spokane River because of the glacial outwash from Lake Missoula. And it really testifies to not just the story of the Great Floods, but, you know, the fish and I actually rely on these cobbles for the river, in particular the part of river where I swim, which is downstream from where I'm sitting about 2 miles. That river would pretty much be dry without the aquifer that was created by these cobbles flowing all the way down from Lake Pend Oreille. This is what they look like up close. They're just spectacular, and we get reports from other observers and writers in Montana about these very same cobbles. These are largely argillite, which is the ancient mudstone of the Belt Basin rocks in Montana that were unloosed by the billions because of the floods from Glacial Lake Missoula when the dam broke on the Clark Fork. This is another shot from my swimming hole. This is one of the big granitic erratics on the riverbed from the flood. On that hillside, all the way up to that pine on the right side of the screen, it's flood cobbles all the way up. It's just a big mass of Lake Missoula flood cobbles that form that hill. Marley Miller was one of your recent guests last year. I love her work. I really regard, as I'm sure many of you do, the Roadside Geology of Washington book is one of my Bibles for knowing where I'm at in the state. This cross section is really valuable to me when I'm introducing people to the Scablands. And one of the reasons for that is if you were to, underneath the table on the left, on the right that I can't see, there's actually an indication of the Belt Basin rock extending all the way to and over the Idaho border into Washington state. So Spokane, where I live, is right on the edge of the ancient coast of Laurentia, actually. And those are the rocks in that area that got bursted and blasted into the Spokane Valley and the Scablands beyond these other areas. And I'm looking at the the middle of the screen, you'll see the ancient exotic terrains that docked onto the state, basically docking like Quinella, where the Q is, just to the west of Spokane, and filling in there as time passed over the last 200 million years. This is obviously a top-down map of the Scabland showing the Cordilleran ice sheet at the end of the last ice age. What we're talking, 20,000 to 2 million years ago for the latest glacial advance. I just show this to people to give them a reference. I know you know where most of these places are, including the Clark Fork Dam, which we'll visit here with a photograph in a minute, the glacial Lake Missoula that brought all the water into the, I shouldn't say all the water. There were other, as you know, there were other releases in ancient Lake Columbia and Spokane that also contributed to the Scablands in the last part of the Ice Age. We're going to visit Wallula Gap, which to me is one of the sacred places of the Scabland, because that's how I was introduced to the Scabland by my grandfather. This is Wallula Gap. This is called Sunrise at Wallula Gap. It was a day I got there just as the mists were rising. The camera is pointed to the, it's disorienting because of course the river is making a 180-degree turn there as it goes by the confluence with the wall and the snake, and does that hairpin turns. That's where the hairpin is. If you look out there on the right, it's going to be turning to the right and heading back towards the Pacific there. But you can see just how worked this is by the Scablands. Obviously, this is where the Columbia River and other rivers historically bored through Wallula Gap. And there it is, yeah. This is a part of the story that, precedes the Great Floods, but of course is revealed in many ways by the Great Floods. This is a map showing the Rosa member of the Wanapum basalt, which vented some 15 million years ago. The layers that you'll see on the right side of the map are the various basalt flows, and the Wanapum is the mustard one on top. That purple line that you see on the right is the ancient vent line. And I want to show you what that, you can actually find that in real time. And this is one of those places. This is lava from the Rosa vent as it erupted 15 million years ago. This is in the Rock Creek drainage. This rock, if I were to hand it to you, would look and feel a lot like pumice. It's much lighter than basalt, but it is the spatter of the lava that piled up on the hillsides around Rock Creek where the vent was 15 million years ago. So it's kind of fun to visit it. It's not far from the parking lot at a public access place called the Esker Ranch property. So that last photo was in rural Whitman County. That basalt flow went all the way to the Columbia, and it created, which to many of us, including most rock climbers in the state, just an iconic formation. This is the Feathers in Frenchman Coulee. I was telling Dale the other day, since the book came out, I actually met one of the Wenatchee elder and storytellers, and his family lived right in this alcove, guarded by the Feathers, like 3 generations ago. Pretty cool. Of course, this is J. Harlan Brett's. That's actually Mount Rushmore in the background. But there he is in his characteristic hard hat. A large part of Beautiful Wounds is a tribute to Brett's because, well, I met Brett's, quote unquote. I didn't meet him in person, but I learned about him 2 years before he died. And 2 years before he died, he got the Penrose Medal, finally, which is the highest award in American geology for his lifetime work. Of course, many of us thought he should have been given that medal a half century earlier. But that's another story. But it is an inspiration to me that as Dale knows, and others know, his work was just rigorous and meticulous, and came, at the end of very hard labor. In fact, it is this year is the centennial of his creating that paper, The Channeled Scablands of the Columbia Plateau, where he first gave voice to his theory and created this long controversy that gratefully ended in his favor after too many years. This is one of the places that fascinated Bretz. This is not just one of the places, but one of the documents. He was, in 1910, I don't think he was even had his advanced degrees in geology yet, but he was a consumer of the geology. And one of the maps he was awaiting was this USGS maps of Grant County in the Quincy area. So this is south of Quincy. Many of you have probably been to the potholes. And what Bretz was looking at was this map and this incredible marking on the terrain. This is all flat in here, and suddenly you get this like giant cloven footprint. And he was not real happy that not only that there wasn't an explanation for it, but he didn't detect a lot of urgency to find one. And it became, of course, one of his projects. This is what the potholes looks like from above. And I just want to tell you, I did not take this from a drone. I took this from the back rim of the northern alcove. And it just gives you, with the equipment I was using that day, I could not get all of Potholes Coulee in one frame. I could only get half. And so this is like the northern ventricle of Potholes Coulee with the ancient lakes right below me. Really cool photo. I love the way it just gives you a scale of the coulee with the ridge in the background. Of course, we're looking towards Wenatchee there to the west. This is much further east. This is a winter photo up on the northern part of Lake Pend Oreille. And why I chose it is because of this feature right in the middle of your screen. If you follow the lake back, you'll see a hillside with snow on it that even when it doesn't have snow on it, looks like somebody took a trowel and flattened it. That's Green Monarch Ridge, and that is just an uplip of this ancient, very hard belt basin rock that was there when the Purcell Trent Glacier came down and collided with that ridge. And it is that collision and that seal that began to back up the Clark Fork River and created Glacial Lake Missoula. This is this incredible map that Bretz and his grad students put together from their visits out here a century ago. This beautiful hand-drawn map of the channeled Scablands. I mean, there was one, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but you can see on the right that he appears to have the ice lobe coming down past Spokane. We now know that that ice lobe stopped, I don't know, fairly well north of Spokane. It didn't get further south in the city as is shown here. But a beautiful piece of work, and just laying out the network of the channels that they traveled across and explored. So this is obviously not Scabland. This is Palouse. You'll notice if you look hard right near the center of the photo, between the green and the tan there, you'll actually see one of my favorite birds, a northern harrier, flying low over the Palouse stubble there. The reason this is here is I use this to illustrate what Eastern Washington would look like uniformly were it not for the great floods. It would be all Palouse Hills. The great floods from Lake Missoula made off and reshaped. Even what's left of the Palouse Hills were profoundly reshaped in many places. But one of the things that's, I mean, the Palouse is wonderful for farmers. It's a Goldilocks soil, as Nick Zentner would put it, because of the way it soaks up water. So if you're fortunate enough to farm in the Palouse, you don't need to irrigate because the snow melt and rainfall is well held by the loess, which is the powdery soil. But on the other hand, it doesn't give you wetlands. We really needed a catastrophe like the Great Floods to open the terrains up where we now have wetlands and Martians. I'm sorry, I think I said Martians. Marshes that we wouldn't have otherwise. This is a USGS paper from 1988, just showing how profoundly Spokane was shaped by the Great Floods. In fact, Brett's called what we now call the Brett's floods. He originally called the Spokane flood because it looked like all the water had come from Spokane. Well, in reality, he didn't know or wasn't sure at the time where the water had come from. But it had come from, basically the Lake Pend Oreille area, the Clark Fork area. And the Spokane Valley channeled it right through Spokane. So Spokane was the nozzle of the Great Floods. And one of the reasons I use this when I talk to Spokane audiences is because for years, people have asked me as a photographer, how do I get to the Scablands? And I say, well, you're pretty much in it already. This is a camas bog out just west of Spokane with a big slab of basalt there. This is, what the Great Flood created. These are, on the left top of your screen is one of the remnant Palouse hills that has been reshaped by the floodwaters. And I call them Brett's Hills. The characteristic of it is that the tails of the hills all sort of point toward Pasco, and the faces all kind of point in the direction of the floodwaters, which is, in this case, would be towards Spokane. One of Brett's early contributions to this debate was to say, I'm finding, and he was leading tours into the Columbia Gorge long before he really fixated on the Scablands proper, but he was beginning to notice, as were other geologists, that there were granitic and metamorphic boulders on hillsides that were far away from any known outcrops of argillite and granite. And so he basically asked people to say, well, if you don't like my Great Flood theory, what's your explanation for how they got here? But it wasn't just boulders. This is America's largest meteorite. And about a century or so ago, it had been discovered originally by Native Americans in the Willamette Valley, but eventually was found again by white settlers who realized that they were onto something, because when they hit it with a hammer, it rang. It's pretty much entirely iron and nickel. And there's a long story that my friend Jack Nisbet tells in his book Ancient Places about the scheme to sort of hijack the meteor from where it was found. But the reason I'm showing it to you is because there is no meteor crater in the Willamette Valley. This thing fell up in the Purcell Trench, probably got entrained in the, or could as well have been entrained in the ice that actually blocked the Clark Fork. And then when that ice dam collapsed, this was on an iceberg that came down through Spokane, down through Alula Gap, made the turn, went all the way down the Columbia Gorge, and parked itself in the Willamette Valley. And it's now, actually it was sold eventually to the American History Museum in New York, where I think this picture was taken some time ago. This is classic Scabland terrain out kind of on the Lincoln County, Spokane County border. This is this is a remnant Palouse Hill, a Brett's Hill, with its one slope pointed towards Spokane, the other toward Pasco. I just love this photo. This is out by the Turnbull National Wildlife Refuge near Cheney. This is classic Scabland terrain with pines and frost. Just a lovely scene out there. I was able to catch on a day not all that different than this morning. Arrowleaf balsam growing. This is out near the Eskier Ranch property in Whitman County. Vintage Scabland terrain with one of the most popular native plants. I'm sure you recognize this is Palouse Falls. I'm going to go quickly by here because we're going to visit Palouse Falls again with some video. This is the Drumheller Channels. A lot of people recognize this photo from one of Nick Zentner's early videos where he was up there with a bow tie and a rock hammer, and his hammer fell down between the cracks in these amazing pillars. These pillars are from the Elephant Mountain basalt flow, which was one of the latest and smallest of the Columbia River basalt flows. But it's characterized by these beautiful thin columns that are well formed, and as you can see, even well spaced. When you're approaching this butte, it almost looks like you're walking toward a box of pencils. That's how they look from afar. And actually, the first time I was here, I actually hiked all across this terrain. So if the direction we're looking is the exact direction of the floods, and you can see the evidence of the flood torrents on the landscape in the Drumheller. This is from Potholes Coulee. This is the falls below Judith Pool in the North Ventricle. It's a lovely place, very popular with people that know where Potholes Coulee is. And of course, this is Upper Grand Coulee, looking north. If you follow the road, I think some call it the $1 Million Highway because of how much blasting it took to build the state highway through the coulee. That road points right at Steamboat Rock. That's Steamboat Rock way up there on the right on the horizon. These are these beautiful scarps at Moses Coulee. This is not far from the town of Palisades, small town of Palisades in Moses Coulee, right along where Douglas Creek comes into Moses Coulee from the north. These are some of my favorite flowers from the Scabland, starting with our native iris, the Rocky Mountain iris on the left, the green banded Mariposa lily, which, because I grew up in the tropics, reminds me of an orchid, but an amazing plant that blooms well after the onset of the really hot weather in the basin. And then the one on the right is sticky geranium, which I have a lot of reasons to like as a person and a photographer, a wild geranium. This is a patch. If you've driven to Spokane, you pass Sprague Lake. And if you've done so in the summer, I'm sure it just looks as beige as can be. But this is how it looks in the spring. This is yarrow, basket flower, and wild geranium in bloom. I would say second week of May, somewhere in there. But it can look like this into early June on a good water year. This is a variant of balsam root called Carey's balsam root, mixed in with wild onion in the pines, pretty much on the Spokane-Lincoln County border near Fish Trap Lake. This is camas, which is found in several areas in the Scabland where the setting is right. It, much like bitterroot, it seems to grow right out of basalt if it has enough water. And that in the background is another Brett's Hill. I have a real passion. I used to do journalism for an online publication called Camas Magazine, which obviously takes its name from this beautiful flower. And this is bitterroot, which obviously has great significance to Native Americans, as does camas as a food source. I'm just amazed at how it just seems, even in the driest of times, to be growing right out of the rock. It's just a beautiful plant, a beautiful subject to photograph. So this is North America's smallest bird. This is the Calliope hummingbird. It's no bigger than my thumb, probably smaller. The body's probably smaller than my tongue. And they are a denizen of the Scablands. And if you're patient enough, like I can be some days, you can actually get photographs like this. They they've also at times will dive bomb me and snap at me. But that's all part of the deal. This is another calliope at a nearby perch, just showing off the beauty of this bird if you can get close enough to see these features. So from the smallest creature I encountered to the biggest, this is obviously a bull moose that I almost ran over with my bike before I got this picture of him. But I had met him before, and we'll actually get to see him again later. He's in the video as well, where he's chilling out. I could tell you more about my relationship with him, but I don't want to keep you up too late, especially if you're on the East Coast. It's another moose. This one's eating one of about the only plant with color on the landscape this time of year, which is red twig dogwood. It's also very munchable as moose food. Just as an aside, I took my son with me that day because we both decided that we hadn't seen a moose in a while. We thought, well, let's go to Turnbull and see if we can see a moose. And sure enough, just as we got through the entrance to Turnbull, there was this moose munching away. You have to be careful with moose. So I asked him to stay in the car while I worked my way in for this photograph. This is a river otter from Latah Creek, which is, this photo was taken only about 2 miles from where I'm sitting today. And obviously it was taken in winter because that's ice. My son and I have actually swam with the river otters in this creek. This guy was not inviting me to swim. He was actually barking at me. You could see the look on his face. He wasn't real happy to see me, but what a great, normally they're a wonderful, charismatic animal to encounter, as are these folks. These are all mule deer does. And I'm laughing because I was setting up to shoot a photograph in the other direction. I'd gotten up way early to drive up to the Drumheller to get a sunrise shot. And I just sensed as I was getting set up that somebody was watching me. I turned behind me, and sure enough, there's all these mule deer peering at me from the top of this rim rock behind me. Yeah, this is, I want to say something about mule deer does, because mule deer are a matriarchal society. And if you hang around them long enough, as I have, you begin to notice that the males are kind of wondering. The males are always taking their leads, it seems, from the females. And I had just encountered this young buck's mom on the side of a trail. I was actually riding my bike in with a yellow helmet, and I threw off my stuff and just gained the rapport of his mom. And as I did that, he just started walking right towards me out of the brush. He was relaxed because she had accepted me. It was pretty cool. And that's how I got this wonderful photo. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but it's early in the morning. That's actually the direct sunlight from the sun coming up that's illuminating his left ear. This animal is wonderful encounter, not as charismatic as mule deer, but this is an American badger, obviously. And they mean business. But you know what I try to do whenever I have a creature encounter is make sure I do everything I can to get good eye contact before I do anything in the way of a sudden movement, and see if I can get them to relax. And that actually worked on this shot as well. Not so much on this one. Coyotes are, well, it's just a matter of fact. If you spend much time out in the Scabland, you will notice that they're vigorously hunted, and they're very wary of people. He or she did not see me. I was one of those rare instances where I actually saw the coyote before the coyote spotted me or smelled me. This is one of my favorite birds, which is also just a hawkeye for people and avoids people instantly for the most part. This is American kestrel, a falcon. You can see on the coloration of that bird why it's so desirable to photograph. And the reason I was able to get this photograph is he was hunting at the time and much more focused on the hunt than he was on me. So there you go, I'll take it. It's another airborne predator, perhaps the signature predator of the Scablands, but not just the Scablands. I'm sure you'll see, you've seen red-tailed hawks all over the landscape, but this is one that was circling the sky one day near Lamont that got his picture taken. It's a Cooper's hawk, another one of the raptors regularly encountered. This is just a great pose in winter. He was out really, he was hunting mourning doves that day. They were all into their, all in a tizzy about it. I love these guys. This is North America's second largest bird, the American white pelican, which frequents the inland lakes. I was astounded at their size. I grew up in Panama with brown pelicans and was shocked the first time that I saw a pelican on the Columbia, because I didn't expect to see a pelican so far from the ocean, but that's where they live. They're an inland bird. These are two of my favorites. You probably recognize the bird in the background as the red-winged blackbird, which is much more common than its cousin, the yellow-headed blackbird, which is, I think of it as the Lord of the Marsh. The way it's an incredible vocalist, and we're going to hear him later in the video if I can manage to get it launched without any difficulties. Western bluebird here. This is up in a burn area in the Scablands up in Palisades Park. It's about 3 miles from here. Rufous-sided towhee, another common bird in the Scablands, in the thickets. Love that red eye. Many birdists refer to this as the spotted towhee. Some of you may remember it was the focus of one of the Northern Exposure TV episodes several years ago. It's the black-headed grosbeak, filmed captured not far from the Spokane River last winter. It's Western kingbird on a wire, another frequent bird in the Scablands. There is actually 2 kingbirds. The Eastern kingbird is probably more common, but this is the Western version of the kingbird. And this is a rarely seen bird, I would say. This is our oriole. This is a Bullock's oriole, which is also the sacred bird of the Wanapum tribe. And it took me quite a bit of work to find these birds, but it helped once I began to recognize their calls, which is usually the case. Now, I actually use my ears more as a birder now than I use my eyes, because sound penetrates woods and thickets in a way that photons don't. So as I've learned to identify bird calls, I've gotten a lot better at being able to photograph birds like the Bullock's oriole. Well, this is a heron I befriended last winter. I've only seen him or his offspring once this year. It's been that kind of a year. But she would, at one day, she just met me on the trail as I was walking down by the creek. It wasn't this day, but my point is she let me hang out with her and let me get within 30, 40 feet where I could, if I could be patient enough, I could get a photograph like this of her fishing and stretching. This is a male hooded merganser, one of the very beautiful winter diving ducks that you'll see on, well, this is also on Latah Creek, but it shows up at the other waterways in the Scablands. These are golden-eyed ducks, also in winter. Another one of these colorful, beautiful diving ducks we just see more of in the winter, or I tend to see more of in the winter than the rest of the year. These are the female golden-eyes checking me out as I'm checking them out. This is a gray catbird. My guess is you've all heard this bird in the Scablands. It's really difficult to get a good look at them. They are incredible vocalists. They mimic a number of birds with their songs, and I don't know, was, I think I was already in this thicket when two of the catbirds appeared, and so I didn't have to move, so I was able to get this photo. This is my favorite, although don't tell the other birds, they're all my favorites. It's a western meadowlark just letting loose. I imagine if it weren't, it snowed all morning here today. I actually was scheduled to take a field trip Thursday that's been rescheduled, but I was thinking if I were going to be out in the Scab, out towards Lamont, places like that on Thursday, that I would hear. I don't know that I'd see meadowlarks. They don't really start singing until April in poses like this, but I think I would hear them clucking in the brush. This is an orange-shafted or northern flicker. The second largest woodpecker that we have in the woods. This is in a Scabland tract with pines, not too far from here. And these are migrating tundra swans, which I expect to be able to get in camera range maybe the next week or two. The weather's probably been cold enough, especially in California, where they may not have started migrating yet. And my guess is, given how nasty a winter they're having in California, they may not leave for the Arctic for a couple of weeks or so, but just beautiful birds. And I think this photo was actually taken in early March a couple of years ago. It's one of my favorite landscapes. This is called Dry Coulee. This is in the complex of canyons that are to the east of Dry Falls. You know, when I showed the photo of the Grand Coulee, the main throat of Upper Grand Coulee, that is just one big half pipe. But the canyon lands that spread out from Dry Falls, especially to the east, are just remarkable. I wish more of it were public land. But you can see from the scale of this just how desirable it is to be there and to be able to photograph it. This is an old abandoned homestead out near, or farmstead out near Lamont. These are black locust trees that were planted by pioneer farmers. Unfortunately, they only last, I mean, they grow real fast and they're great windbreaks, but they only last about a century or so. This is my grandpa on the right, and that's my mom on the left. So it was my grandpa Gil that introduced me to Ulula Gap. My mom grew up in Pasco, and I well remember when we would visit Pasco that she would just sort of sigh and refer to it as God's country. And I grew up in a large Catholic family, and we all laughed at that because we'd been growing up in the rainforest. It's just like, how can you say that? Because we're there in the summer, and it's the Horse Heaven Hills are just this beige, treeless terrain. But she's right. I mean, I defer to her on that. She made her point, and I'm glad I lived long enough to help photograph it. She was a great woman. One of the sad parts of this story is that I had to leave my real life. I shouldn't say it that way. I had to put my professional ambitions on hold to take care of her the last 3 years of her life. She had dementia, and she just needed 24-hour care. And in the scheme of things, it was important for me to be one of her caregivers and her bathers. But it was just a real privilege. She was just such a sweet woman and had such a positive outlook on life. She died just a few weeks really before I finished the manuscript of the book, and you can read about that in the book. These are my kids. My daughter Audrey on the left, who's a writer like I am, and is training to become an art therapist. It's my son Devin on the right, who's a very talented musician, plays saxophone, and if I can get him away from his music, you can see he'll carry my tripod. That's him climbing with my tripod when I was photographing the Rocks of Sharon, which is an ancient outcrop. Gosh, I want to say southeast of Spokane. It's actually partly a Scabland feature. even though the rocks of Sharon are really high, the great floods scored a direct hit on that part of the Spokane Valley and nearly overtopped the rocks that Devin and I were climbing that day. And this is some information about me and my photography business with my website. If you go onto rhubarbskies.net, you'll also see my new feature. I do a daily posting called The Daily Rhubarb. And I've started very heavily on geology, and I sort of specialize in my science writing on physics and geology. So there's a nice mix of that, plus some other things. I post a photograph called Today's Postcard 6 days a week. So right, if you can find rhubarbskies.net, or if you want to subscribe to my Substack, please do. And you've got my contact information if you're interested in my photographs. So what I'm going to do now is just escape from this and show you A Day in the Scablands, which is an 8-minute film. And the best part about it for you is that you won't be hearing me talk because it's all going to be on video. Let me try to avoid making the mistake I made last time. Okay. It's just clearing its throat. It'll be up here in a second. Here we go. See if I can get this on full screen.
We're not seeing it.
Oh, you're not? Okay. I'm sorry. I thought it was showing. Let me try this again. Let's see. I'm obviously having trouble with the share screen function. But well, I'm going to try this and just expand it manually. Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right. I apologize for that.
Tim, we're getting a suggestion. You should click on the green circle on the top left of the screen.
Okay. Oh, there we go. It's a little bigger. Thank you.
Tim, we're not getting any audio.
You're not?
No, why don't you stop it for just a second here
Okay.
and then unshare the screen? I hate to have you do that, but do that. And then when you share the screen, look for two little boxes to share.
Let me do one more thing here and see if I can.
It usually says optimize for video.
One second. So where should I be looking?
When you hit the share screen button,
Okay.
there's two boxes, and one of the boxes says optimize sound for video.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so it's on now.
Okay.
Okay. It wants a password. I'll just guess what I can do.
Come on. There we go.
Here now.
Much better. That's perfect. Wow. Good deal. Oh.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect, Tim.
Okay, sorry. Sorry for the glitch getting started there, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway. Anyway, I